Boris Johnson has just dropped another mask-off moment. In his latest Daily Mail column, he's celebrating the fact that Britain's birth rates are collapsing, calling it the best bit of global news in a long time, and a demographic dividend blessing. This is the same Boris who has 9 kids of his own and spent years as Prime Minister opening the floodgates to record-breaking mass immigration. While native British birth rates and deaths are now set to outnumber births every single year from 2026 onwards, Johnson is popping the champagne. Today, we're exposing exactly why this isn't some happy accident. It's a direct result of the policies he championed. The hard truth, mass immigration under Tories didn't just fail to fix the birth rate, it actively helped destroy it. With the latest ONS projections confirming that deaths will exceed births in the UK from mid-2026 for the first time since the mid-1970s, the demographic reality is staring us in the face. Native British fertility has sunk to around 1.42 to 1.45 children per woman, well below the replacement level. Yet instead of sounding the alarm, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is out here framing population decline. Johnson's column is crystal clear. Falling global and UK birth rates are not a crisis but self-regulation and a blessing that will ease pressure on resources and nature. He dismisses the usual doom-mongering and says we should welcome the demographic dividend. Conveniently, he leaves out the fact that this collapse is hitting the native British population hardest while overall population keeps growing through immigration. He has had 9 children himself, yet he's telling the rest of us that fewer British babies is fantastic. This is the same man who, as Prime Minister, oversaw the biggest wave of immigration in British history. Net migration exploding to hundreds of thousands every year, hitting records that made previous Labour governments look restrained. Now he's acting like the disappearance of native births is some beautiful organic process. It's not, it's policy. Here's the mechanism they will never admit. Flooding the country with millions of people drives up housing costs, crushes wages for younger workers, overloads schools and the NHS, and creates a permanent sense of instability and cultural displacement. Young native British couples look at the insane cost of a family home, the endless waiting lists, and the rapid change in their neighbourhoods and simply decide they cannot afford kids, or delay them indefinitely. Under Johnson's watch, the Tories delivered the highest immigration numbers ever, all while pretending to be a party of controlled borders. The result? Native fertility rates keep falling because the economic and social conditions for starting British families got deliberately worse. Meanwhile, higher fertility immigrant communities kept the overall population growing, masking the replacement that's happening in real time. Johnson and the establishment didn't fail to boost birth rates. They chose policies that made British babies harder while importing the replacement population. This isn't incompetence, it's demographic engineering by another name. Johnson isn't some lone voice. He's the perfect embodiment of post-Brexit conservative grift. Promised to take back control, deliver open borders on steroids, then shrug when the native population starts disappearing and tells us it's actually brilliant news. The system needs cheap labour, it needs to keep property prices high for its donor class, and it needs to dilute any sense of cohesive British identity that might resist globalist policies. Mass immigration achieves all three, while the birth rate collapse quietly removes the next generation of native Brits, who might actually push back. Constant celebration of falling birth rates is the elite's way of saying, don't worry about the great replacement, celebrate it. Real principled politics would have secured the borders, put British workers and families first, and created the economic conditions for native Brits to rise again. Instead, we got Boris' wave of migration and now a former PM cheering the consequences. This is why voting Tory or any of the Uniparty options changes nothing. The decline is baked in by design. Britain is sleepwalking into a future where the native population shrinks, while the elites tell us fewer British babies is somehow a win for the planet. Johnson's comments prove they know exactly what's happening, and they're fine with it. The same people who lectured us about diversity and demographic strength and now openly celebrating the demographic disappearance of the people who built the country. Stop falling for the spin. So anyway guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video about me talking about Boris Johnson and what he mentioned about the whole Great Replacement. And obviously to do with Boris, he obviously is a complete and utter buffoon. Why he got into power in the first place is beyond me, especially all the stunts that he's done with the rugby tackle, with that one of the poor Thai kids or Filipino children, I can't remember, when he was representing Britain abroad. And also to do with the whole him on a zip wire holding 2 British flags as sort of just an insult to Britain. And a lot of people say that he's a lovable buffoon, which people could justify. But I noticed that under Boris Johnson that he's pretty much a kind of like a mask-on character. And with him mentioning this, it seems like the mask has slipped. You see, when it comes down to Boris Johnson, I've noticed quite something similar to what's happened, where people are basically very Fabian, where they would basically have a mask on, pretending that they're a complete moron, when in reality, they actually know what they're doing, or they do it on purpose. Kind of just like a two-marked persona, where basically he will act like an idiot 1 minute, and then when he's talking about something serious, maybe like issues with being in support with, I don't know, like something like with Israel, he will overly zealously cheer on. And the more that he keeps talking about stuff, the more that the mask slips. And when people walk up to him and criticise him, people will start to see crack. And as well, I know someone who's actually have worked with Boris Johnson, and they've obviously talked about how much of a nice guy he is, which you can obviously justify this with obviously the interactions he's had with people out on the street, going to local pubs, meeting local people. I mean, you can say what you want about Boris Johnson, but he comes off as, in quote, a nice guy. But I remember actually watching a villain cartoon analysis of an animation to do with Mega Man and the supervillain, what was it called, Titan. And Titan basically, even though technically Hal is his real name, is a good person, in quote, it doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to do good things. Like, he will have the mask on, he will, act like the superhero that everyone wants needs, and then when he doesn't get his way, he will just burst out in anger or act in a retaliative way, where he will basically just react in such a way that is so extreme that a lot of the people will actually look at his behaviour and look at what he's actually doing. And when it comes down to this article, like I said, it's a slip-off moment where he will basically reveal his true self as that he's basically just another lying Tory. And obviously you see this with the modern Conservatives, especially with Reform UK and Nigel Farage's persona, where he acts like the Messiah. He's going to, in quote, save Britain, and yeah, he will deliver nothing, like I said in yesterday's video to do with Nigel Farage and his history with Brexit and all the other things that he's done. A lot of these Tories like to put on a mask of being anti-establishment, but then also sucking the establishment's dick. And like I said, a lot of this comes off very contradictory and also very malice. And as well, if you want to go and link in the description below with links to my other channels and Discord as well.